Welcome to State of the Nation. I'm Ndaka Majaka. Today we're continuing with our discussion on the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. And today we're joined by the Commission's Deputy Chair, Commissioner Lilian Chigwedere. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ndaka, for welcoming me to your program. I'm happy to be here, and I'm sure we're going to have a fruitful discussion regarding the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity Thematic Committee of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission.
Well, of course, the first thing that we'll want to discuss is how the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity Thematic Committee has assisted the marginalized in taking part in some of its work. Of course, we're not talking about the marginalized, we're referring to the young girls, women and those with disability. How has the committee and the NPRC at large made sure that these can take part in some of its events and activities?
Thank you very much, Ndaka. You may be interested to know that our Act has got a whole chapter 9 on gender, just gender and marginalized groups. So as a commission, we pay particular attention to that. And you find that in all our outreaches, we have ensured that we included the youth, both male and female, to partake in all the activities that we were doing. And also in the issue of the Safe Spaces program is a huge program for our commission, which is going to continue in all the provinces. And while we started off with safe spaces for women, we are saying that boys, girls, marginalized groups, even people with disability, need to be attended to. So in our rollout program, the next phase of the safe spaces, we've ensured that as we go out to the provinces, we also include safe spaces just for the youth, safe spaces for disability, safe spaces for anybody who needs it. Even the media, we can have safe spaces for you.
It's interesting that you point out to the fact that you want to expand the safe spaces horizon, because as you may be aware, the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development speaks to the elimination of discrimination through the promotion of women empowerment. Of course, this can only be done through gender responsive policies as well as legislation. So how have you, as the NPRC and the VSDG thematic committee, made sure or lobbied with policymakers that there can be gender parity in key decision-making institutions?
In terms of gender parity, as a VSGD committee, we are cognizant of the fact that as a commission, the victims and women and children and gender are at the center of the commission. So what we have done in terms of working with the marginalized groups, we are looking at the laws, the current laws that are there, to understand what are the gaps in those laws in terms of addressing the gender and all the other issues related to marginalized populations. And we are engaging lawyers. We've had one session with lawyers, because when it comes to law, I think you agree with me that we need the experts. And we are engaging the lawyers to analyze the laws, and then where there are gaps, they will advise us, and then we can make a policy recommendation either to Parliament or to the lawmakers, so that the laws that are there will become more gender supportive and also more victim supportive.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're still in the early stages and you're engaging the lawyers. So has there been any specific legislative framework that you as the NPRC or the thematic committee has brought forward to the lawmakers, lobbying for the betterment of the disadvantaged as well as those with disabilities?
You understand that that stage of presenting a policy or a law to the lawmakers will emerge from all these round tables that we are holding with the lawyers. And also we have got the Research and Knowledge Management Committee that is also looking at different populations and also trying to find out what are the needs and also input into the recommendations. So at the moment we haven't recommended anything because it's work in progress.
All right, so in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, I imagine you wouldn't have any time frame as to when this can possibly happen in the near future.
You know, the COVID-19 has thrown everyone out of sync. And the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission is a commission that works with people in groups, in large groups sometimes. And a lot of the groups that we work with are not even online. So we can't even reach them to be able to interact with them. So what the Victim Support and Gender Diversity Committee, something that is specific about it is that it is an external committee. And being external, it is made up of all these organizations that ordinarily deal with issues to do with victims, to do with women, to do with youth and children and so on. So that thematic committee is the one that attends to issues. And these issues, we are saying to the public that if any women or children or youth have got issues to do with violence during this lockdown, they can either contact the organizations that are in the thematic committee, organizations like MSASA Project, like Counseling Services Unit, like National Transitional Justice. I'm sure they will have hotlines for them. But at the commission, I know we've got hotlines for the commission where people can phone in with their issues and then they can be assisted.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about the issue of gender-based violence in these trying times of the COVID-19 pandemic, because recent statistics indicate a spike in gender-based violence during these trying times. Of course, you mentioned that you've taken steps as the NPRC to ensure that those who are victims during these trying times can have an ear or somewhere to turn when they need help. What other measures, apart from these partners that you're talking about, has the NPRC put in place to ensure that the victims get the assistance that they need?
One thing that you need to understand is that the NPRC is a composite of members of the commission and also the public. And the NPRC cannot be everywhere. And the idea of coming up with these thematic committees was that the people that come into the committee are members of community and are members of the public, and they come from certain areas and they've got certain responsibilities, including also the peace committees that have been established. We are trying to decentralize the work of the commission because, as you know, there are only 9 commissioners. Now there are 8, and also the staff is nothing much to talk about because we've only about 30-something staff, and we cannot cover the whole country. And this is why the commission decided to come up with the thematic committees and include members of the public in those thematic committees so that we can then reach as many people as possible.
So clearly the commission is overwhelmed. You mentioned that your staff complement could possibly not be enough to cover everything that the commission needs to do. Are there any plans to increase the commission staff complement anytime soon?
Well, according to our initial structure, we are actually supposed to have over 100 members of staff. I think it's about 101, 102. And mind you, our commission is funded, as far as the salaries are concerned, from the fiscus. And we go by what the fiscus gives us. And so far, they've only managed to raise funds for about 32, 33 people.
So that's less than 50%.
So that is
actual staff
less than
complement you need.
50%, you're right. But we cannot use that as an excuse for not doing the work. We are trying to maximize the work of the commission with the few people that we have. And hence, these committees come in very handy. I'm sure the other commissioners that you may have interviewed before will have told you that all the external thematic committees are comprised of outsiders to the commission who are very useful and who are also people that have been doing work already in the peace building industry. And therefore, that helps us to fill in the gaps where our staff cannot get in.
All right, now we'll move away from the Commission's administrative work. We'll take it provincial. There have been complaints in Matabeleland. People are having difficulties acquiring birth certificates. Now, what has the Commission done to ensure that the marginalized, obviously these are the women, the children, and those with disability, what has the Commission done to ensure that they can attain or acquire this critical birth record?
Yes, you are right that the issue of birth certificate is a thorny issue. It's something that arose as we were doing our outreaches. It was one of the prominent things that was raised, not the only one, but there are other issues like reburials, like issues of trying to relocate graves of those that died during Gukurahundi, and also to try and rebury them. So there are many issues in Matabeleland. And what the Commission has started doing is to put a committee, a Gukurahundi thematic committee. This is something that is new. If it were not for the COVID, we would actually have launched it possibly last month. But we have already identified organizations and people in Matabeleland who are closer to the situation to assist us in identifying people that may need birth certificates and also people that may need reburials and so on. So this is actually work in progress. And we've also engaged the Registrar General to try and understand the modalities of how this can be done. Because when you issue birth certificates, you need witnesses. And in a situation where there was something like violence, the people that have the history of the person who needs the birth certificate may not be there. So there are a lot of issues that need to be discussed with the Registrar General. We have met the Registrar General once, and we were lined up to meet him actually 2 weeks before the lockdown. So that is where we are. But we know that the issue of birth certificates is not just even a Matabeleland thing. You'll find that people that have experienced the different conflicts in different parts of the country, they also are facing challenges with birth certificates. But for Matabeleland specifically, we have decided that we need this committee which will help us to identify the people. And then together with the Registrar General, we can then see how birth certificates can be used.
Deputy Chairperson of the Commission, you are talking about the issue of birth certificates as well as the issue of relocation of graves, in addition to the issue of reburials. Don't you think that mandating all this under one thematic committee could perhaps overwhelm the thematic committee?
Well, that thematic committee will be working in conjunction, not in isolation. It will be working in conjunction with the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity. It will also be working with the Healing and Reconciliation Committee. It will also be working with the Complaints Handling and Investigations. So all the committees will come on board. The idea is that a committee that is specifically based in that region has got the advantage that they are on the ground. Like I said, our staff is very minimal, and they will be on the ground to run around and to be able to advise the commission that, well, in this area, this is what is there, and this is what needs to be done. Yes.
Deputy Chair, I'm sure you're aware of reports coming out of Midland concerning the violence being perpetrated by the machete gangs. Of course, the vulnerable that we're speaking about here have been affected by this violence. Is there anything that the Commission has done to ensure that these victims are in safe spaces in Midlands regarding the issue of the machete gangs?
You are very right about the machete gangs. In fact, when we went to Zombe for the women's safe spaces, we were actually horrified by some of the stories that we had there, that these machete gangs are hacking people to death. And it was not only the women who were expressing this, even the chiefs. And the chiefs were concerned and worried, because what is happening is that when people are hacked to death, the families whose member has been hacked to death, they take the body and go and put it in the kitchen of the perpetrator. And chiefs were saying, we don't know what to do about this. And it's an issue that, together with the chiefs, were brought to the attention of the police. We've also brought it to the attention of the parliament. And through our report, which is somewhere between the minister and the parliament, all these recommendations are made that tight security is required in those areas. Because a lot of women were complaining that they can't even move around, because these machete gangs, if they see them carrying groceries, they may even take that grocery away from them. So the issue of machete gangs is a very, very serious issue. And the police, the commission, has actually approached them. We even had a meeting in Midlands with chiefs and the police commissioners there in Midlands to highlight these issues, so that they take it up from their security point to see what can be done and what needs to be done in order to bring peace to these areas that are being terrorized by machete gangs. And the chiefs are even concerned by the way the gangs are creating holes everywhere in the countryside. And people that have got cattle are also losing their livestock, because it's also going into those holes. So definitely the issue of machete gangs is a very, very serious issue. And the commission did not take it lightly. Once we got that, we did alert the police.
It's commendable that the Commission has brought in law enforcement into this very complex matrix. Could you perhaps be aware of any convictions that were made since you as a Commission filed the reports concerning the activities around the machete gangs?
As far as convictions, I want to be honest with you, we haven't had any, or we still haven't followed up to see what has taken place. But our message did get to the security agents.
Right. Just moving away from that, the Women Safe Spaces and Wellness Program was an initiative of the particular thematic committee that we're discussing about today. What were some of the emerging lessons that came out as this program toured the various provinces around the country and assisted women? And apart from the issues that emerged, how do you intend to expand on the issues that were brought up through this program?
That question touches at the heart of the VSGD program, because the Commission is there to heal, to reconcile, and to bring unity, and to bring sustainable peace. And how do you heal and reconcile if you don't have people talking and not just talking, but talking in a safe environment so that they can express their experiences. And these experiences are very important because when we went round the country, we did 5 provinces. We did Matabeleland North, Matabeleland South, Bulawayo, Midlands, and Marsh East. And throughout the provinces, you could see that people have been bottling up a lot of emotions, bottling up feelings, bottling up, a lot of things that if not addressed, they can explode at another time. We don't know when and how. And so the Women's Safe Spaces was a good program and is still a good program for the Commission, because what it does, it helps people to start talking about issues. And also, when they talk about issues, and if these issues are brought to the attention of the lawmakers and all the relevant people, we believe that some of the justice can be done in terms of the requests from the women. And as a follow-up to that, we only did 5 provinces out of 10. So we still have to go to the other provinces and have the same kind of thing, safe spaces for women, and not just for women. Because when we were in Matabeleland, for example, the men even said, "Why are you leaving us? We also have got issues." So the issue of safe spaces is also regulated in our Act, that women and marginalized groups must be given safe spaces in order to express themselves. So in our next round of programs, we'll try and finish the 5 provinces that are left, and then we start the round again with other groups, the men, the children, the youth, the people with disability. In fact, with anybody who feels they need to express, who have experienced past conflict. Because past conflict, if it is not addressed, it's a time bomb. And why do I say a time bomb? If I've been affected by violence and I've had no chance to talk about it, any small thing can trigger anything. And it will not be surprising to find that at some point, victims will become perpetrators, and perpetrators will become victims. So the program on safe spaces is a very, very important program for the Commission under the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity Thematic Committee.
Well, it's really impressive that you're thinking of taking it to other groups apart from the women. Let's just bring it closer home. The NPRC is broadly mandated with the promotion of women, the empowerment, as well as the elimination of discrimination through, of course, gender-responsive legislation as well as policies. So I'm sure you are working with similar-minded commissions as well as institutions. As a matter of interest, how has the NPRC been relating or working with the Gender Commission in executing its mandate?
Thank you very much for that. The policy of the Commission is that we collaborate with everyone, because the issue of peace and reconciliation touches the whole nation. And therefore, we try by all means to collaborate with as many organizations as possible in order to address the issues of women, of children, of anybody. And in particular, the Gender Commission deals with gender issues on a very broad level. They deal with issues of especially women. But you'll find that gender, the word gender refers to males and females. So you'll find that as a commission, we've been able also to liaise with the Gender Commission in order to look, very fact that we are looking at these lawyers who are trying to analyze the laws, the Gender Commission is also part of that. So that is how we collaborate with them. Because when it comes to laws, they cut across all commissions.
Sadly, let us look at yet another seemingly problematic area, political violence. Political violence has been fingered as the main reason or the main hindrance why women choose to refrain from any political activity. As a commission, what have you done to ensure that women can participate equally in the electoral process, given that most of them are scared of being unfortunate casualties of political violence?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. You know, the issue of violence against women is almost like historical, because as a country we are coming from a history of a patriarchal society where, you know, the notion of the differences between men and women were clearly defined. And as a result, you'll find that the greatest weapon to deal with injustices against women or against men is through education. And if people are educated through programs to understand their roles and also to understand their rights as people, especially the women, there needs to be a lot of education that needs to be done in that area. And as the Victim Support, Gender and Diversity Committee, we are fortunate that our committee includes a lot of women's organizations, like Women in Politics, like Women Coalition of Zimbabwe, and all these other organizations that are working with women in order to promote the rights of women. So as a commission, as a committee that has got all these members within it, we work and collaborate with the organizations in order to educate, because I think the best weapon is education. Not just education for women, but also education for men, to understand that women are not a threat. They are partners. And therefore, without that education, you'll find that the violence will continue and continue and continue. And as a commission, through our thematic committee and all the members of the thematic committee, this is something that we try to fight on. As a commission, purely as a commission, not looking at the thematic committee, the commission is really apolitical, and we cannot be delving deeply into political issues because the commission is apolitical. It doesn't take any sides. So our role is to look at how we can empower the women and how we can empower the society to be able to appreciate the role of women, and also to understand that they've got a right to be part of the governing bodies, to take part in politics.
Of course, Deputy Chair. And seeing as we're still on that question, what are you doing also to encourage the youth to take part in the electoral process equally?
That is a very difficult question to answer, but I think the youth, in our opinion as a commission, is that the youth, it depends which stage of youth you are talking about, because the understanding that we have is that the youth should take time to develop themselves and prepare them for later life, unless we are talking of youths that are over 30 plus. But I want to believe that from the age 0 right up to about 30, youths are busy developing skills and getting educated, acquiring the skills that are needed for the adult life. So as a commission, we do work with youth organizations that are trying to promote the issues that come to them for youths. But I think that's basically the way we look at it.
And of course, going forward, what are some of the programs or the offerings that we can expect from this particular thematic committee as they seek to assist those who are in vulnerable positions or those who seem like they're disadvantaged, for example, the women, the young girls, as well as those living with a disability going forward?
Okay, as we go forward, as a thematic committee, we have got about 5 programs that are lined up in order to achieve our mandate of empowering women and also healing victims. And the first one is that the safe spaces, like I said, is going to continue in the other provinces and also with the different groups. And then the second program is to map out service providers in the different areas who are able to provide service to victims and also able to assist victims in their local areas. So that is a program that we are assisted with, especially during this lockdown, because it's something that we can do online. So we are designing the questions for the different providers to come forward so that we know who is doing what in what area. And after that, then we need to design a training program for them to train them in how they handle victims and also basic training in trauma counseling and mental health and all that. And then we also have a program, the one I talked about, engagement of the lawyers. We need to continue that, to have these lawyers to assist us to analyze the gaps in the laws so that when we make recommendations to Parliament, we know exactly what we are talking about. So those are some of the programs that are in the pipeline for the Commission, and
Right.
especially for the thematic committee on the gender victim.
All right. It's interesting. All these programs seem very insightful and very considerate for those you're dealing with as a commission, and particularly for this committee. But seeing as the president extended the lockdown period indefinitely, of course, subject to 2-week reviews, how have you as a commission sought to maybe make some of these initiatives available online? I know you mentioned earlier on in the interview that some of the people that you're targeting as a commission and as a committee do not have access online. So what happens then? Is there going to be a backlog? What's going to happen in terms of trying to help them? Because data costs have also gone up. What are you doing as a commission to make sure that perhaps some of your programs are available virtually for those who need them?
I think the program on safe spaces, I think there are no two ways about it. It's a program that needs to get to the people and to have the people talk about their issues. Perhaps those who are online, one way might be to create a platform where they can express their issues and talk about their issues. But as a commission, we're really concerned about the victims of violence in their locality. And a lot of these are in rural areas where even online it's going to be very difficult. So the program on safe spaces in this lockdown is something that may be sort of
An unfortunate casualty
suspended,
of the pandemic.
you know, until things are normal. But the program on mapping stakeholders, that one is easy to do online, and we've already started designing the tool and the instrument in order to get the information. And then if we need to train those people again, in this lockdown, we'll have to see what the requirements are. Take smaller groups at a time, but it's going to involve a lot of cost, because for where you are supposed to have had a meeting with about 30 or 50 people, you now have to do with 20 or 15 at a time, and that takes a lot of resources. But that program of mapping, that one is easy. It's something that we are actually engaged with and we are working with. And then the issue of the round table for the lawyers, it's something again that we now need to redesign from the original that we had, so that we now identify the lawyers and also perhaps design the issues that we want them to address in terms of analyzing the laws. So at least those two programs can be done online. But the others that need really physical gatherings together become a bit tricky in this COVID situation.
All right, Deputy Chair Chigwedere, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding light on all these issues that you've shared with us. Thank you, ma'am.
No, thank you very much for coming to interview me. And I also would like to thank ZTN, because ZTN has been with us on these safe spaces right from the beginning. They traveled with us to Matebele North, South, Bulawayo, Midlands, Mtoko. They were there. So don't tire. Keep working with us, because we need you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank
It
you
was an
very much.
absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. This was State of the Nation with the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, as we focused on their Victim, Gender and Diversity Thematic Committee, which is assisting and helping women and those in disadvantaged situations. If you've got any queries, any comments on this particular program, please go to our Facebook page, Zimpapers TV, or our Twitter page. Our handle is @Zimpapers Television Network. If you can, by all means, do visit our website, that is www.ztn.co.zw. Thank you for watching.